She was invisible, just a maid enduring endless cruelty until one ruthless negotiation changed everything. When Korean Mafia Lord Kwan Tae demands the right to claim anything to settle a business dispute, he shocks the room by choosing her. Amanda was meant to be a transaction, a possession passed from one powerful man to another. But when Kwan Tae refuses to trade her for a fortune, when he protects her from the very people who created her, she realizes this dangerous man might be her only chance at redemption. What begins as a cold transaction transforms into something neither of them expected. When her former masters dare to reclaim what they lost, Kwan Tae proves that touching what belongs to him comes at a devastating price. Welcome back to Afro-Korean Drama TV, where love knows no boundaries. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to comment below where you're watching from. Now, back to the story. Amanda moved through the Whitmore estate like a ghost, silent and invisible despite her very real presence. The bruise blooming along her left shoulder blade ached with every breath, a reminder from this morning when the groundskeeper had shoved her against the stone wall for moving too slowly. Pain was her constant companion, as familiar and unwelcome as the contempt that dripped from every word spoken in her direction. The mahogany dining room fell silent as she entered with fresh wine. Marcus Whitmore sat at the head of the elaborate table, his aging face etched with frustration. Across from him sat Kwan Tae, a Korean businessman whose reputation preceded him like a dark cloud. Everything about Kwan Tae suggested danger, refined into an expensive suit. His dark eyes contained secrets and controlled fury beneath a veneer of composure that only made him more terrifying. The tension between the two men was palpable, a living thing that had been festering for months. They'd built their empires in the same city, and inevitably, those empires had collided. Shipments intercepted. Business deals sabotaged. Contacts poached. The warfare had become personal, and today's meeting was supposed to end it. Neither man wanted this destructive stalemate anymore. Amanda kept her eyes down as she poured, her movements practiced and efficient. Invisibility was survival in this household. She'd learned long ago that the less attention she drew, the less likely she was to be hurt. The wine bottle trembled slightly in her hands as she reached toward Marcus's glass. More wine. Victoria's shrill voice cut through the room like a whip. Marcus's sister reclined in her chair with calculated grace, her designer dress worth more than Amanda made in a year. Victoria's attention never left Kwan Tae, her eyes predatory, her smile designed to entice. Come now, such a distinguished guest shouldn't go unappreciated. As Amanda approached with the bottle, Victoria's hand shot up, catching her wrist. The wine spilled across the white tablecloth in a crimson arc, clumsy wretch. Victoria's voice dripped venom. She turned to Kwan Tae with exaggerated dismay. You see what we endure? Marcus insists on keeping her, but honestly, she's completely incompetent. I've told him repeatedly he should just throw her out onto the streets where she belongs. Heat flooded Amanda's cheeks, but she kept her eyes down, her jaw clenched so tightly her teeth ached. Marcus laughed, a cruel bark of amusement, while his men smirked from their posts along the walls. Her humiliation was entertainment, a brief diversion from the serious business at hand. My apologies, Amanda whispered, the words tasting like ash. Oh, she speaks, Victoria exclaimed mockingly. She leaned toward Kwan Tae, placing her hand on his arm with deliberate intimacy. You know, some people are simply born for servitude. It's in their nature. Unlike us, they lack the capacity for refinement, for excellence. We understand quality, don't we? We recognize what truly matters. Kwan Tae's expression remained neutral, though something flickered in his dark eyes. He gently removed his arm from Victoria's grasp and leaned back in his chair with deliberate distance. Shall we conclude our business? His voice was quiet, but carried absolute authority. I believe Marcus said I could choose anything to resolve this dispute. Marcus straightened, suddenly business-focused. Yes. What will it take for you to step back? Money? Territory? Business concessions? Name your price and let's be done with this. Kwan Tae was silent for a long moment. His gaze moved slowly around the room, assessing each face with the precision of a predator. It passed over Marcus's arrogance, Victoria's jealous rage, the guards at attention, and finally settled on Amanda. She felt the weight of that look like a physical force, felt seen in a way that was both terrifying and strangely compelling. His dark eyes held hers for 3 long seconds. I choose her, Kwan Tae said quietly, gesturing toward Amanda. I want her. The silence that followed was absolute, a vacuum that seemed to suck the air from the room. Then Marcus began to laugh, a genuine belly laugh of complete disbelief. His guards followed suit, their guffaws echoing off the walls. Victoria's face contorted with confusion and then indignation. The maid. Marcus gasped between laughs. You're joking. You must be joking. This is absurd. Victoria shot to her feet, her chair scraping harshly against the floor. You want that pathetic little servant over me? Over a genuine partnership with this family? She's nothing. She's worthless. She's enough. Kwan Tae's voice cut through the laughter like a blade. He stood slowly, and the amusement died in every throat, choked off by something lethal in his tone. I don't recall asking for your opinions. Marcus, you gave your word. Anything I wanted. Do you intend to break that word in front of witnesses? The color drained from Marcus's face as he calculated his options. The business dispute had cost him already, and backing down now would humiliate him. He shrugged with calculated indifference. Fine. Take her. Good riddance, honestly. One less mouth to feed. He waved his hand dismissively. She's yours. We're done here. Victoria's face went blotchy with rage. Derek, you can't be serious. You're just going to let him. She's not worth. This is humiliating. The only thing humiliating, Kwan Tae said softly, his voice carrying steel that made Victoria step back, is how you've all treated her. We're leaving. Now. He crossed the room to where Amanda stood frozen, her mind reeling. He extended his hand. Come with me, he said, and his voice was gentle, almost kind. Please. Amanda's world tilted. This had to be some elaborate joke, another form of torture. But Kwan Tae's hand was extended toward her, and his eyes held something she hadn't seen directed at her in so long she'd almost forgotten what it looked like. Respect. Not pity, not possession, but recognition. Her legs moved before her mind decided. She set down the wine bottle with shaking hands and followed him from the room, walking past Victoria's furious face, past Marcus's dismissive sneer, past the guards who watched with confusion. The night air hit her face as they exited the mansion, cold and sharp and real. A sleek black car waited in the driveway. Kwan Tae opened the passenger door, waited for her to get in, then closed it carefully before moving around to the driver's side. The leather seats were soft, impossibly soft, and smelled of expensive cologne and something else, something like safety. Though Amanda didn't trust the feeling. As they pulled away from the estate, the building growing smaller in the side mirror, Amanda found her voice. It came out smaller than she wanted, but defiant despite her fear. Why? She asked, turning to look at his profile illuminated by the dashboard lights. Why did you choose me? Kwan Tae's hands tightened on the steering wheel, his knuckles going white. The muscle in his jaw worked as he stared at the road ahead. He didn't answer, didn't even look at her, just kept his eyes fixed on the darkness stretching before them. But Amanda could feel the tension radiating from him, barely controlled fury simmering beneath his composed exterior. The mansion materialized from the darkness like something from a dream, all clean lines and warm light spilling from tall windows. Amanda pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the car window, watching as they passed through iron gates that opened silently at their approach. The grounds were immaculate, even in the dim evening light. Manicured gardens flanked a circular driveway where a fountain stood silent, its water stilled for the night. Kwan Tae parked and came around to open her door. Amanda stepped out onto smooth stone pavers, her worn shoes looking shabby against their perfection. She clutched her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how threadbare her maid's uniform had become, how stained and poorly maintained it was compared to this place of understated wealth. "This way," Kwan Tae said, his voice still carrying that careful neutrality from the car. He led her up wide steps to double doors that opened into an entrance hall that made her breath catch. Where Marcus's mansion had been all cold marble and harsh angles, this space breathed warmth. Rich hardwood floors glowed under soft lighting, and the walls were painted in colors that reminded her of sunset, cream and gold and the palest amber. An older woman appeared from a side corridor, her gray hair pulled into a neat bun, her expression kind but curious. "Mr. Kwan Tae, welcome home," she said warmly. "I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow." "Mrs. Chin, this is Amanda," Kwan Tae said, his voice taking on a different quality when speaking to the older woman. "She'll be working here as my personal assistant. Could you show her to the east bedroom and make sure she has everything she needs?" The older woman's eyebrows rose fractionally, but she nodded with professional grace. "Of course, sir. This way, dear." Amanda glanced back at Kwan Tae, but he had already turned away, disappearing down another corridor without a backward look. The walk up a sweeping staircase felt like walking through a dream. Mrs. Chin led her to a room on the second floor and opened the door. Amanda stepped inside and stopped completely. The space was larger than any room she'd ever occupied, painted in soft lavender with white trim. A four-poster bed dominated one wall, dressed in linens that looked cloud-soft, and there was an actual sitting area with an armchair positioned near a window that overlooked gardens. Through another door, she glimpsed white tile and gleaming fixtures. A bathroom of her own. "This can't be right," Amanda whispered. "Servants don't stay in rooms like this." Mrs. Chen's expression softened. Mr. Kwan Tae was very clear about the arrangements. "This is your room. The closet has some clothes that should fit you until we can get you properly outfitted. Everything you need is here. Is there anything else?" Amanda shook her head mutely, and Mrs. Chin withdrew with a gentle smile. Alone, Amanda moved deeper into the room, touching things hesitantly as if they might disappear. The bed was real, the mattress yielding when she pressed her hand against it. The window opened at her touch, letting in night air that smelled of jasmine and fresh earth instead of the stale air of the servants' quarters. She found the clothes Mrs. Chin had mentioned, simple but well-made pieces in her size, including a proper uniform that wasn't threadbare or stained. In the bathroom, she spent long minutes under a shower with perfect water pressure and unlimited hot water, washing away months of grime and exhaustion and fear. When she emerged, she felt almost human again. But sleep wouldn't come. Amanda lay in that impossibly soft bed, staring at the ceiling as moonlight painted shadows across it. Her body was exhausted, bone-deep tired, but her mind raced in endless circles. Why had Kwan Tae chosen her? What did he want from her? The fear she'd kept at bay through the shock of the evening came flooding back. Men didn't claim women the way he'd claimed her without expecting something in return. She'd escaped one hell. But what if she'd only traded it for another, prettier one? She watched the moon arc across her window, counting the hours until pale gray light crept across the sky. Giving up on sleep, she dressed in the new uniform and ventured downstairs. Mrs. Chin found her in the kitchen looking lost. "Couldn't sleep?" the older woman asked knowingly. "First nights in a new place are always hard. Come on, let's get you some breakfast and I'll go over your duties." The duties were shockingly mundane. Amanda would maintain Kwan Tae's personal spaces, his bedroom and private study, ensure his schedule ran smoothly, handle his correspondence, manage cleaning and meals. There was no mention of anything else. No coded language about special services, no knowing looks. Mrs. Chin treated it all as perfectly ordinary, as if beautiful young women were acquired in business negotiations every day and put to work as simple assistants. By mid-morning, Amanda was in Kwan Tae's study, a magnificent room lined with books and dominated by a massive desk positioned before floor-to-ceiling windows. She'd seen Kwan Tae only once in passing, and he'd merely nodded at her before continuing his phone conversation. Still distant, though not cold. Different than that night in the car. The days began to develop a rhythm. Kwan Tae was everywhere and nowhere, a constant presence that somehow maintained perfect distance. He never touched her, never made inappropriate demands, never looked at her the way Marcus had. Yet he seemed always aware of her, appearing whenever she needed something, solving problems before she could voice them. On her 5th day, disaster struck. Amanda was organizing Kwan Tae's study when her sleeve caught the edge of an ancient vase on his shelf. A beautiful piece of deep blue porcelain with gold accents. She lunged for it, but her hands fumbled and it shattered against the hardwood floor in an explosion of ceramic shards. Her hands shook as she knelt to gather the pieces, her mind already calculating the cost. Months of wages, maybe years. Marcus would have beaten her for this. The fear was so familiar it settled around her shoulders with comfortable weight. What happened? Kwan Tae's voice came from the doorway. Amanda kept her head down, her fingers bleeding where sharp edges had cut her. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It was an accident. I'll pay for it. I'll work however long it takes. Please just... Amanda. He crossed the room and knelt beside her, his hands carefully taking her bleeding fingers. Stop. Look at me. She forced herself to meet his eyes, expecting anger, disappointment, calculation of her debt. Instead, she saw only concern. It's a vase, he said quietly. Objects break. Accidents happen. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and wrapped it around her bleeding hand. Mrs. Chin keeps a first aid kit in the kitchen. Go clean these cuts properly. I'll handle this. But it's fine, he said firmly. Go. Amanda went, her mind reeling once again. That night, she lay in her beautiful room and tried to understand the man who had claimed her like a possession, yet treated her with more respect than anyone in her entire life. The doorbell rang with aggressive insistence that made Mrs. Chun frown as she answered it. Amanda was preparing dinner in the kitchen when she heard the familiar grating voice that made her stomach drop. Where is he? I need to see Kwan Tae immediately. Victoria swept into the entrance hall like a storm system, all sharp perfume and sharper edges. She wore a dress that was more suggestion than garment, red silk that clung to every curve. Her heels clicked against the hardwood with staccato precision as her eyes scanned the space with predatory intent. Miss Victoria, Mrs. Chin said with professional coolness, Mr. Kwan Tae is in a meeting. If you'd like to wait, I will wait. Victoria's gaze landed on Amanda, and a slow, cruel smile spread across her painted lips. Oh, how perfect. The little servant girl can keep me company. You, she pointed a manicured finger at Amanda, take me to Kwan Tae's study now. Mrs. Chen's expression showed clear disapproval, but she nodded to Amanda. Show Miss Victoria to the sitting room. I'll inform Mr. Kwan Tae of her arrival. The walk down the hallway felt endless. Victoria followed close behind, close enough that Amanda could feel the heat of her presence, smell that overwhelming perfume. When they were out of Mrs. Chen's earshot, Victoria leaned in, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. Enjoying your little fantasy, are you? Playing house in his mansion, pretending you're anything more than a novelty that will wear off? You're just his newest plaything, sweetheart. And playthings get broken when he's done with them. Amanda's jaw clenched, but she kept walking, kept her spine straight. She'd survived worse than Victoria's poison. He'll get bored, Victoria continued, her heels clicking faster to keep pace. Men like Kwan Tae always do. And when he does, where will you go? Back to the streets? Back on your knees, scrubbing floors, being reminded every day that you are nothing. That you never mattered. They reached the sitting room and Amanda gestured inside with trembling hands. Please wait here. Victoria's hand shot out, gripping Amanda's wrist hard enough to bruise. Listen to me carefully. I'm going to make Kwan Tae an offer today. And when he accepts it, and he will, you'll be right back where you belong. On your knees, scrubbing floors, being reminded that you are worthless. Let go of her, Kwan Tae's voice cut through the air like a blade. He stood in the doorway, still in his business attire, his tie loosened. His expression was terrible in its controlled fury. Victoria released Amanda immediately, her face transforming into a charming smile. Kwan Tae, finally. I've been waiting. What are you doing in my home, Victoria? The coldness in his tone would have frozen fire. Victoria's smile faltered, but held. I came to make you a business proposition. One I think you'll find quite attractive. Kwan Tae's eyes flicked to Amanda, taking in her pale face, the red mark on her wrist where Victoria had gripped her. Something dangerous flickered in his expression. Amanda, you're dismissed. Thank you. Amanda fled gratefully, but she found herself in the hallway just around the corner, close enough to hear their voices. Unable to make herself leave, she told herself she needed to know what Victoria was planning. Let's not waste time with pleasantries, Victoria said, her voice taking on a business-like quality. I know you want the waterfront territory that Marcus controls. It's prime development land worth millions. I can get it for you. In exchange for what? Kwan Tae's voice was flat. Give her back. Return the maid to Marcus's household where she belongs, and the territory is yours. It's a simple transaction, Kwan Tae. Property for property. You have to admit it's a much better deal than whatever momentary satisfaction you're getting from your little act of charity. The silence that followed was so long that Amanda's heart began to pound. She pressed her back against the wall, her hands fisted at her sides. Of course, he would take the deal. Men like Kwan Tae didn't refuse profitable business arrangements for the sake of a maid. Why would he? No, Kwan Tae said. The word was flat, final, absolute. What? Victoria's voice pitched higher with disbelief. Kwan Tae, be reasonable. You can't possibly. I said no. And let me make something perfectly clear, Victoria, so there's no misunderstanding. Amanda is not a bargaining chip. She is not a piece of property to be traded or returned. She is under my protection, and she will remain under my protection for as long as she chooses to stay here. This is insane. She's just a servant, a nobody, Victoria said desperately. She is mine to protect, Kwan Tae interrupted, and his voice carried a weight that made Amanda's breath catch, and I don't give up what's mine. Not for territory, not for money, not for anything. Now get out of my house. You're making a mistake. The only mistake was yours, coming here and thinking I would ever consider your proposition. Leave now before I have security escort you out. Amanda heard the sharp click of Victoria's heels storming away. She heard Mrs. Chen's calm voice directing her to the exit. She heard the door slam with enough force to rattle the windows. She stood frozen in the hallway, her mind racing, her heart doing complicated things in her chest. She didn't see Kwan Tae approach until he was standing in front of her. I know you were listening, he said. Heat flooded her cheeks. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Don't apologize, he said. He studied her face for a long moment. Your wrist. Let me see. She held out her arm, and he examined the angry red marks, his jaw tightening. I'll have Mrs. Chen bring ice. But Amanda, he looked directly into her eyes, that needs to stop being your measure of acceptable treatment. That mark shouldn't be on your skin. They stood there in the hallway, the afternoon light slanting through the windows, and Amanda felt something crack open inside her chest. All the questions she'd been holding back, all the confusion and fear and desperate need to understand came flooding out. Why? Her voice broke on the word. Why did you really choose me? Why won't you trade me for something valuable? Why do you protect me when you barely speak to me? Kwan Tae was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he gestured to the study. Come with me. She followed him into that book-lined sanctuary, and he moved to the windows, his back to her, his hands in his pockets. When he finally spoke, His voice was different, lower, more vulnerable than she'd ever heard it. I'd been watching Marcus's operation for months. Surveillance, gathering information, looking for leverage. And I kept seeing you, he said. He turned to face her. The way you held yourself, even when they were cruel. The way you never completely broke, never let them destroy whatever it was inside you that kept you standing. I watched you endure things that would have shattered most people, and you just endured. Amanda wrapped her arms around herself. You felt sorry for me. No, he said, and the word was fierce. That's not it at all. Pity is passive, Amanda. Pity looks away. What I felt was rage at the injustice of it. You had dignity and strength and grace, and they treated you like nothing. They were blind to what was right in front of them. I'm just a maid, she whispered. You're so much more than that, he said. He took a step closer. When Victoria stood there humiliating you, when they all laughed, I realized I had a chance to do something that wasn't about business or strategy or winning. I could choose justice. I could choose to recognize your worth when everyone else saw nothing. But I don't understand what you want from me, Amanda said. I want you to be safe, Kwan Tae said simply. I want you to sleep without fear. I want you to heal from what they did to you. I want you to remember that you're a person who deserves respect and kindness. That's all. That's everything. You don't even know me, Amanda said, but the words felt hollow. Then let me learn, he said. Something shifted in his expression, vulnerability breaking through that careful control. If you're willing. The air between them felt charged, heavy with possibility, and the weight of truths finally spoken. Amanda looked at him, really looked at him, and saw past the cold exterior to the man underneath, a man who had seen her when she was invisible, who had chosen justice over profit, who protected without asking for anything in return. I'm willing, she whispered. And in that moment, something fundamental changed between them. Two broken people seeing each other clearly for the first time, beginning to understand that healing might be possible, that worth could be recognized, that protection could transform into something deeper if they were brave enough to let it. The change began with small things. A week after their conversation in the study, Kwan Tae appeared in the library where Amanda was reading and simply asked, "Do you like this book?" She'd frozen, uncertain. I love it. I haven't read in years, and I forgot how much I missed it." He pulled another volume from the shelf and handed it to her. "Take these two. Read whatever you want." That's not a request from an employer, Amanda. It's a suggestion from someone who thinks you might deserve to remember who you are. She did read them. That night, curled in her armchair as rain pattered against the windows, she devoured the first chapters of stories she'd heard about but never imagined she'd hold in her hands. It became their ritual. Mornings over coffee, Amanda, no longer standing at attention but sitting, talking, debating the merits of fictional characters and plot twists. Kwan Tae's reserved exterior began to crack, revealing a man with strong opinions about literature, a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard, and a smile that transformed his entire face when she managed to coax it out. "You're different than I expected," she told him one morning, 3 weeks into their new dynamic. "How so?" he asked, his eyes holding warmth. Warmer. Softer. More human, she searched for the word. "I could say the same about you," he said. His eyes held hers over the rim of his cup. "You're not the terrified girl who asked me why in the car anymore." "I'm still terrified sometimes," she admitted. "Of me?" "No," she said, and the truth of it surprised her. "Not of you. Of this ending. Of waking up and discovering it was all temporary." Kwan Tae set down his cup carefully. "What if I told you it doesn't have to be?" The conversation shifted, then deepened. He told her about his childhood, raised by a father who valued success over everything, who taught him that emotions were weakness and vulnerability was failure. He explained how he'd built walls so high that he'd forgotten what it felt like to let someone in. "Until you," he said quietly. "You made me remember that walls keep things out, but they also keep you trapped inside them." Amanda shared her own story in fragments over the following weeks. The parents she'd lost young, the relatives who'd taken her in only to exploit her labor, the string of households where she'd learned that kindness was rare and cruelty was casual. She told him about the dreams she'd abandoned, the art she used to love creating before exhaustion stole her passion. "Show me," Kwan Tae said when she mentioned her art. "I haven't drawn in years. I wouldn't even know where to start." The next day, a full set of professional art supplies appeared in her room with a note in his precise handwriting. "Start anywhere. Start now." She cried when she saw them, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that someone believed she was worth investing in. That night, she made her first tentative sketches, her hand remembering what her mind had tried to forget. Kwan Tae's study became their sanctuary. Evenings found them there. Amanda curled in the leather chair by the window with her sketch pad while Kwan Tae worked at his desk, the comfortable silence between them speaking volumes. Sometimes he'd look up and find her watching him, and instead of the fear that might have been there weeks ago, he saw curiosity, warmth, something that made his carefully controlled heart beat faster. "What are you drawing?" he asked one night. She hesitated, then turned the pad around. It was him, captured in charcoal, his expression thoughtful as he read, the evening light catching the angles of his face. But she'd drawn something more than his features. She'd somehow captured the loneliness he carried, the vulnerability he tried to hide, the man beneath the armor. "Is this how you see me?" His voice was rough. "Yes," she said, meeting his gaze. "Is it wrong?" "No," he said. He stood and crossed to her, studying the drawing more closely. "It's the most seen I've felt in my entire life." Their hands brushed as he handed back the sketch pad, and neither pulled away. The touch lingered, transformed from accidental to intentional, fingers intertwining in a moment that felt both terrifying and inevitable. "Amanda," he said softly, "I need you to know this thing between us. It's not about gratitude or obligation. You understand that, don't you?" "Then what is it about?" she asked. "Recognition," he said. He lifted his free hand to her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "I see you. Not the maid, not the victim, not the person they tried to make you believe you were. I see the woman who survived impossible things and came through still capable of hope, still capable of being brave enough to believe you deserve more than just survival." "I'm afraid," she whispered. "So am I," he admitted. His arms wrapped around her with a reverence that stole her breath. "I've spent my whole life protecting myself from feeling too much. And then you walked into my world and suddenly all those walls I built feel like a prison instead of protection." Amanda stood, closing the small distance between them. She was still shorter, had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "What if we're both brave together?" His answer was in the way he pulled her close, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that felt like a promise. The next morning, Amanda stood in Kwan Tae's study doorway, his credit card gleaming between her fingers. "I'm just going to the market. I'll be quick," she said with a soft smile. Kwan Tae looked up from his laptop, his expression immediately shifting to concern. "Take the full security detail." "It's just groceries," Amanda said gently. "I don't need protection to buy vegetables. After everything with Victoria and Marcus, and it's been weeks now. They know better than to come near you, but I need to know you're safe," he said. She walked over and kissed his forehead. "One guard, that's my compromise." Kwan Tae studied her face, seeing the independence and confidence she'd gained since coming to live with him. "One guard," he finally conceded. "Jinho stays close, and you call me if anything feels off." "I promise," she squeezed his hand. "I'll be back before you know it." 20 minutes later, Amanda was in the produce section of an upscale market, Jinho keeping a respectful distance while remaining alert. She was comparing avocados when a familiar voice cut through the ambient noise like glass. Well, playing house with Kwan Tae's credit card." "I see." Amanda's stomach dropped. She turned slowly to find Victoria standing 3 feet away. Marcus stood beside her. Both wore expressions of pure malice. Keep walking, Amanda said quietly, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I don't want trouble. Of course you don't, Victoria sneered, stepping closer. You want to keep pretending you're something more than hired help playing dress up. Jinho moved forward immediately, positioning himself between Amanda and the siblings. Miss Amanda, we should go. The bodyguard speaks, Marcus said with a cold laugh. Tell me, does Kwan Tae make you watch her 24/7? Must be exhausting babysitting his latest charity case. I said, keep walking, Amanda's voice hardened. But Victoria grabbed her arm before she could step back, her nails digging in hard enough to break skin. Don't you dare walk away from me, Victoria hissed. You think you're better than me now? You think because Kwan Tae decided to play savior that you actually matter? Let her go, Jinho ordered, reaching for Victoria's wrist. Suddenly, 4 men materialized from different aisles. Marcus's security. They surrounded Jinho, blocking his path to Amanda. I wouldn't, Marcus warned. We just want to talk to her. Remind her of a few things she seems to have forgotten. Amanda tried to pull free, but Victoria's nails dug deeper into her arm. Forgotten what? That you're cruel? That you spent months making my life miserable? That you're nothing. Victoria's voice rose, drawing stares from other shoppers. That Kwan Tae will get bored and throw you away like the trash you are. She shoved Amanda hard. Amanda stumbled backward, her hip colliding with the sharp corner of a metal display rack. Pain exploded through her side as she crashed to the floor, her hands catching her fall, her elbow scraping against the tile. Miss Amanda. Jinho lunged forward, but Marcus's men grabbed him for against one. He fought like a demon, landing a solid punch that sent one man reeling, but the others overwhelmed him. In the chaos, his hand found the emergency beacon on his watch, a direct alert to Kwan Tae. Get away from me. Amanda gasped, backing against the shelving as Marcus advanced. You need to remember your place, he said coldly, reaching for her. Jinho fought harder, but the odds were impossible. In the chaos, the emergency alert reached Kwan Tae. The automatic doors at the front of the store burst open with such force that several people screamed. Kwan Tae strode through like an avenging angel, 6 of his men flanking him. His eyes swept the scene with terrifying precision. Jinho restrained, Amanda on the ground bleeding, Marcus and Victoria standing over her like predators. The temperature in the store plummeted. Get away from her, Kwan Tae said, each word a bullet, cold and precise. His men moved with military efficiency, pulling Marcus's security off Jinho and creating a protective barrier around the scene. Other shoppers backed away quickly, sensing the danger crackling through the air. Marcus released Amanda immediately, stepping back with his hands raised. This is a misunderstanding. Kwan Tae wasn't listening. He moved straight to Amanda, dropping to his knees beside her. His hands were gentle as he assessed her injuries. The scrape on her elbow, the way she held her bruised ribs, the fear and pain in her eyes. Did they touch you? His voice was barely above a whisper, but everyone heard the lethal promise beneath it. Amanda nodded, and something flickered across Kwan Tae's face that made even his own men tense. He stood slowly, turning to face Marcus and Victoria. The control he was famous for had shattered, replaced by cold, calculating fury. You put your hands on her, Kwan Tae said, his voice deadly quiet. After everything, after I made it clear what would happen. It was just, we were talking, Victoria stammered, finally realizing the magnitude of her mistake. There are cameras, Kwan Tae said, gesturing to the security system. Witnesses. I can see the bruises forming on her arm from your grip. I can see blood. Kwan Tae, Marcus tried. No, Kwan Tae cut him off with a single word. You had your chance, multiple chances. But you couldn't let it go. You saw her happy, saw her thriving, and you had to try to drag her back down. Kwan Tae took a step forward, and both Marcus and Victoria visibly flinched. His men moved closer, awaiting orders. The entire store had gone silent, everyone frozen by the tension. I'm going to destroy you, Kwan Tae said simply. Not quickly, slowly. I'm going to dismantle everything you've built, every connection you have, every shred of power you think you possess. And you'll know exactly why it's happening. He turned back to Amanda, his expression transforming from rage to concern as he carefully helped her to her feet. She winced, leaning against him. "Kwan Tae," Amanda said softly, her hand on his chest, "please, let's just go." "After what they did," he started. "I know." Her voice was steady despite the pain. "I know you want to make them pay right now, but I just want to leave. Please." The battle raged across his face, every instinct screaming for immediate retribution, warring against Amanda's plea. His jaw clenched so hard it looked painful. "Please," she repeated, her eyes searching his. "Take me home." The tension stretched impossibly tight. Kwan Tae's men were ready to move on his command. Marcus and Victoria looked terrified, finally understanding they'd crossed a line there was no coming back from. Finally, Kwan Tae's hand came up to cup Amanda's face with infinite gentleness, despite the rage still rolling off him in waves. "Okay," he said, just to her. "We'll go." He turned back to Marcus and Victoria one final time. "This isn't over. Not even close. What happens next will make you wish you'd never learned her name." Then he carefully lifted Amanda into his arms, cradling her against his chest as if she were made of glass. Jinho and the other guards formed a protective circle around them as they walked out, leaving Marcus and Victoria standing in the wreckage of their own making. In the car, Kwan Tae held Amanda close, his hand trembling slightly as he brushed hair from her face. "I should have insisted on more guards." "You couldn't have known," she whispered. "I should have," his voice cracked. "They hurt you and I wasn't there." "But you came," she said, resting her head against his shoulder. "You always come." As they drove away, Amanda could feel the storm brewing around Kwan Tae, the careful, methodical fury of a man who'd been pushed past his limits. Kwan Tae carried Amanda into the mansion, his jaw locked tight, his eyes dark with barely contained fury. He settled her on their bed with infinite care, personally tending to each injury. His hands trembled slightly despite his careful control. "I'm okay," Amanda kept saying. But he wouldn't stop until he was satisfied she'd been properly cared for, until he'd cataloged every mark Marcus and Victoria had left on her skin. When he finally stepped back, his phone was already ringing. He ignored it, his attention solely on Amanda. But she saw the storm building behind his eyes, the cold, calculated rage of a man who'd reached his limit. "What are you going to do?" she asked softly. Kwan Tae's expression hardened. "What I should have done the first time they touched you." He kissed her forehead, then retreated to his office. Through the door, Amanda heard his voice. Low, controlled, and absolutely ruthless. He was making call after call, each conversation brief and devastating. Kwan Tae had built his empire on strategy, connections, and an impeccable reputation for being fair, but unforgiving to those who crossed him. He'd always operated with restraint, with calculated precision, but Marcus and Victoria had made a fatal miscalculation. They'd hurt the one person who'd made him believe in something beyond power and control. Now he unleashed everything. Within 2 hours, Victoria's business leases were terminated. The property owners suddenly remembering clauses that allowed immediate eviction. Kwan Tae moved through his network like a scalpel, cutting away every support Marcus and Victoria had relied on. He didn't threaten. He didn't bluster. He simply made it clear to everyone in his sphere. Anyone who did business with them was choosing them over him. In this city, no one was foolish enough to make that choice. By midnight, 3 of Victoria's retail locations were closed. Marcus's bank had called in his business loans, demanding immediate payment he couldn't possibly make. Suppliers were canceling contracts. Partners were withdrawing. Their carefully constructed empire was collapsing like a house of cards. Kwan Tae worked through the night, methodical and merciless. When Amanda found him at dawn, still at his desk, surrounded by documents and his phone, he looked exhausted but grimly satisfied. Have you slept at all? She asked, setting down a cup of coffee. No, he pulled her onto his lap, wrapping his arms around her waist and burying his face against her neck. I needed to finish it. Is it finished? Almost, he said. By tomorrow, they'll have nothing left. Everything they built, every ounce of power they thought they had, gone. Amanda traced the line of his jaw. You're scaring me a little. I'm scaring myself, he admitted. I've never felt like this. This need to completely destroy someone. But every time I close my eyes, I see you on that floor bleeding and scared, and I can't. I can't let that go unpunished. She pressed her forehead to his. I know, and I'm not asking you to. They deserve consequences. I just don't want this to consume you. It won't, he promised. Once they understand what they've lost and why, once they've paid for what they did, then it's over. Then we move on. His phone rang again. He glanced at the screen and a cold smile crossed his face. It's Marcus, he answered on speaker. Yes, Kwan Tae, please. Marcus's voice was desperate, stripped of all arrogance. Please, we need to talk. Everything is falling apart. The investors, the properties, the bank. Yes, I know. I arranged it. The silence was deafening. In one day, you destroyed everything we had in one day. You heard Amanda. Kwan Tae's voice was ice. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences? You had your chance. I took her from your house. I warned you at the negotiation. I made it clear what would happen if you came near her again. But you couldn't help yourselves. We made a mistake. A terrible mistake. Please, Kwan Tae, I'm begging you. Tell me what you want. Anything. I'll do anything. Marcus was openly crying. Kwan Tae looked at Amanda and she saw the question in his eyes. She nodded slowly. You want me to stop? Kwan Tae said. Then you and Victoria come to my home tomorrow at 2 o'clock. You apologize to Amanda. A real apology. You acknowledge every way you've hurt her, humiliated her, dehumanized her. You get on your knees if necessary, and you make her believe you understand what you did. We will, Marcus said immediately. I swear we'll be there. Thank you, Kwan Tae. Thank you. I'm not doing this for you, Kwan Tae cut him off. I'm doing it for her because she deserves to hear you admit what you did. She deserves that closure. He hung up without waiting for a response. Amanda was quiet for a moment, processing. You really did destroy everything they had. Yes, Kwan Tae said, no apology in his voice, no regret. That's terrifying power. I know, he cupped her face gently. But I've only ever used it for 2 reasons. To protect what's mine and to ensure people face consequences for their cruelty. Marcus and Victoria spent years hurting people weaker than them. They needed to understand what it feels like to be powerless. And tomorrow you get your justice. You get to see them acknowledge what they did. And then he paused, then you decide if we're done or if I keep going. She studied his face. You'd really let me decide. You're not my possession, Amanda, he said. You're my partner. This is your justice to claim, not mine. Whatever you choose, I'll support you. The next day, at exactly 2 p.m., Marcus and Victoria arrived. They looked nothing like the arrogant people who'd tormented Amanda at the supermarket. Marcus's expensive suit was wrinkled, his face haggard. Victoria's designer dress hung on her frame, her makeup unable to hide the exhaustion and fear in her eyes. Kwan Tae's men escorted them to the sitting room where Amanda waited. Kwan Tae stood protectively beside her chair. The siblings looked small, diminished, standing in the grand room that showcased everything they'd lost. For a long moment, no one spoke. Well, Kwan Tae's voice was sharp, you asked for this meeting. Make it worth her time. Marcus stepped forward first, and to Amanda's shock, he dropped to one knee. Amanda, his voice broke. I'm so sorry for everything. For how I treated you when you worked in my home. For standing by while my staff abused you. For letting Victoria humiliate you. For putting my hands on you yesterday. Tears streamed down his face. You didn't deserve any of it. You were just trying to survive. And I made your life hell because I could. Because I never saw you as a person who mattered. Victoria stood frozen, pride and shame warring across her face. Marcus looked back at her. After a long moment, Victoria lowered herself to her knees beside her brother, though every movement screamed reluctance. She looked at Amanda and something in her expression cracked. "I was jealous," Victoria whispered. "From the first moment Kwan Tae looked at you, I saw something in his eyes he'd never given me. And I hated you for it. I wanted to destroy you because if I couldn't have his attention, I didn't want anyone else to have it." She wiped tears away angrily. "But that doesn't excuse what I did, how I treated you, the things I said. You didn't deserve any of it." The apology hung in the air. Amanda sat very still, processing words she'd never imagined hearing from these two people. "You made me feel like I was nothing," Amanda said finally, her voice steady but emotional. "Every single day you found new ways to remind me that I didn't matter, that I was less than human. Do you understand what that does to a person?" "Yes," Marcus said, his voice raw. "I understand now. I'm so ashamed." "I thought I was powerful," Victoria added, her composure finally breaking completely. "But real power isn't making others feel small. You were stronger than me every day. You survived my cruelty with your dignity intact. I see that now." Amanda stood slowly and walked toward them. They looked up at her, waiting for judgment. "I'm not going to say I forgive you," Amanda said quietly. "I'm not there yet, and I may never be. What you did left scars that won't disappear because you apologized." She took a breath, feeling Kwan Tae's presence behind her, supporting her. "But I accept your apology. I hear that you understand what you did was wrong. And I won't ask Kwan Tae to destroy you completely. But if you ever come near me again with anything other than respect, there won't be a second chance. And I want you to prove this apology is real. Volunteer. Work with organizations that help domestic workers. Public acknowledgement of how you've treated service staff. Genuine change in how you conduct your businesses if you rebuild them." Marcus nodded vigorously. "We will. I promise." Amanda looked at Kwan Tae, who squeezed her hand but remained silent. This was her moment, her decision. "You can go now," Amanda said. Marcus and Victoria scrambled to their feet and left quickly, escorted out by Kwan Tae's security. When the door closed, Kwan Tae pulled Amanda into his arms. "How do you feel?" "Free," she said, surprised by the truth of it. "I thought I'd feel triumphant or vindicated, but mostly I just feel free, like I finally closed a chapter I've been stuck in." "You are magnificent," he murmured, "strong, fair, merciful. Watching you claim your justice. I've never been more in awe of you." Amanda smiled, feeling peace settle in her chest. "Thank you for giving me the choice, for letting me decide how this ended." "Always," he promised, kissing her softly. "You're not someone I protect from the world, Amanda. You're someone I protect while you face the world. There's a difference." He held her close. "And Marcus and Victoria, I'll ease the pressure gradually. If they honor their commitments to you, they can rebuild. But they'll never forget what it cost them to hurt you." As evening fell, they sat in the garden together. Amanda curled against Kwan Tae's side, watching the sunset paint the sky in gold and rose. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," Kwan Tae pressed a kiss to her temple, "we live our lives. We build our future. We leave Marcus and Victoria in the past where they belong." He tilted her face up to his. "Now I spend every day showing you that you were never nothing. You're everything. Everything." She teased gently. "Everything," he confirmed. "My partner, my equal. The woman who made me believe in something beyond power and control. You made me believe in us, Amanda, in building instead of destroying, in being better. You were always capable of better," she said softly. "I just helped you see it. Then let me spend the rest of my life proving you right." 3 months after the supermarket incident, Kwan Tae asked Amanda to meet him on the mansion's rooftop. She'd been up there before. It was a beautiful space transformed into a garden with flowering plants and comfortable seating offering panoramic views of the city. But tonight it was different. Strings of lights glowed warmly overhead and candles flickered on every surface, creating an intimate oasis above the world. "What's all this?" she asked, but her heart already knew. Kwan Tae stood in the center of the space, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked nervous. "When I first saw you in Marcus's household, you were surrounded by people who couldn't see your worth. I told myself I chose you to give you justice, to recognize what they refused to see. But the truth is you chose me too. You saw past the walls I'd built, past the cold exterior, to the man underneath who was just lonely and broken and desperate to be seen." He took her hands, his thumbs tracing circles on her palms. "You made me want to be better. You taught me that strength isn't the same as hardness. That vulnerability isn't weakness. That love is the bravest thing we can choose. Together, we're more than we could ever be alone. And I want that. I want us for the rest of my life." He knelt, and Amanda's breath caught as he pulled out a small velvet box. The ring inside was stunning, a deep blue sapphire surrounded by diamonds, unique and perfect. "Amanda, will you marry me?" Tears streamed down her face as she nodded, then found her voice. "Yes. Yes. 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and when he stood, she threw her arms around him, laughing and crying simultaneously. "You gave me a life worth living," she whispered. "How could I say anything but yes?" They set the date for 3 months later, wanting something intimate rather than the society spectacle people expected. The wedding took place in the mansion's garden on a perfect autumn afternoon, surrounded by only their closest friends and the staff who'd become family. Mrs. Chen cried through the entire ceremony. Kwan Tae's business partners looked on with barely concealed shock at seeing their ruthless colleague transformed by love. But none of it mattered to Amanda as she walked down the rose-petal-strewn aisle toward the man who'd saved her by letting her save him in return. Late in the evening, as they slow danced to music that drifted through the garden, Amanda looked up at her husband, and smiled. "What are you thinking?" Kwan Tae asked, his hand warm on her waist. "That we saved each other. That we're going to have an incredible life together. That we're going to spend forever making up for all the years we lost to pain." "Always and forever, remember," he said. "Always and forever," she echoed. Two people who'd been denied by the world, who'd found in each other not just love, but home, danced in their garden under the stars. They'd walked through fire to find each other, survived darkness to reach the light, and now they faced a future limited only by their courage to keep choosing each other every single day. It was enough. It was everything. It was theirs. Thank you for watching Afro-Korean Drama TV. Make sure to comment below where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our new stories. We'll see you in the next episode.